Hey everyone, welcome back to Porter's Product Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Porter, of course. And in this show, we're here to unpack any strategies, insights, and stories behind successful product marketing. Today, we're diving into the art and science of executing product marketing campaigns. And who better to guide us through that than Tom Nikl? Tom is a seasoned product marketer with an impressive career spanning Google Cloud, VMware, and Citrix. He's led innovative campaigns across cloud computing, virtualization, and enterprise solutions, making him a go-to expert in this space. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Amazing intro. I think I'm going to put that in my LinkedIn, actually. So thank you for writing that for me.
Good. I'm glad I could be of service. Well, awesome. Well, let's go ahead and jump right in. So, campaign execution is such a key part of product marketing, and it really starts with a solid plan. Tom, what do you think are the most critical steps to successfully planning and executing a campaign as a product marketer?
Sure. So let me start out by saying I'd be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge that throughout my career, I've worked with some awesome campaign teams. So this is not just Tom doing this all on his own. This takes a breadth of teamwork and other people helping me out. But based on working with them and what I've done myself, this is kind of what I've learned. So the first step to what will hopefully be eventually a successful campaign is asking why. Like, why are you thinking about doing a campaign at all? Are you launching a net new product or a feature for a product? Do you have a product that's in market that's already lagging and you want to build awareness for it? Are you trying to capture a new market? Are you launching something in a new region, for example? So the first question you really need to ask is like, why? Why are you trying to do this? Because that ultimately will inform the next question you want to ask, which is how. And so once you know why you want to do it, then you can start really thinking about, okay, well, who's my audience going to be for this? What's my market? What kind of assets do I need? What will my calls to action be? Do I need social media for this? Do I not? What's my messaging going to be? All of the things that are going to go into a successful campaign plan really hinge on the why. And I think a good example is, the difference between a product launch, for example. You're trying to build awareness for something that's brand new, right? So that's going to be very kind of like cast a very, very wide net versus a product that's already in market that the general public might actually kind of know about, but is lagging or sales have been down. That's probably going to be a very targeted campaign, possibly towards existing customers that have stopped spending. That's going to be a much more specific message, a much more targeted audience, maybe something more like account-based marketing or something like that. So being grounded in the why, I think, is really important before you get into any of that. And then third, it sounds silly to talk about this early on, but like results, like what's your goal? And you can reverse engineer some of this from, if you're launching a product, well, okay, you want to sell it. If you're trying to build awareness for something that's going to launch, then, maybe share of voice or, social media impressions or something like that. But understanding like what is your goal? I mean, don't launch a campaign before you know what you're going to track. And oh, by the way, have a way to track it.
Yes.
Sounds really obvious. But I've been in that situation many, many times, especially at startups where, you're basically like forced to do a campaign without any real way to track your results. Like maybe you have, Salesforce and like that's almost about it. So you don't really even have like the greatest way to track leads, and then the sales team takes over those leads, and there's not really a great way to track like the full end of like the marketing funnel throughout your campaign. And then other things are even trickier, in my opinion, to track, like share of voice. You need like a PR team or something to help with that and things like that. So those are the three things I think you really need to think about when you're putting a plan on paper. Why are you doing this? How do you think you'll do it? And what results are you aiming for?
Totally. Yeah, and that's good. I like those are kind of three succinct, simple steps. First, why are you even doing this in the first place? Getting that kind of critical reasoning of the purpose of a campaign is really key. And then the second piece about how are you going to do it? What audience you're trying to get to? What are those CTAs? What are the channels that you're going to reach that audience with? Which is totally kind of the more of the executional side, but you need to understand how you're going to get to those people. Third, yes, the results. What are those metrics that you're going to say that this was abide by to say that this was a successful campaign? And you're right, and you need to have a mechanism to track it, and that could be multiple things from revenue targets to new bookings to leads to any number of other qualifiers. So I think
Pipeline is usually the one that I think is most appropriate for marketing. It depends how big your company is and how you're structured, but I think marketing source pipeline, MQLs, usually good targets for a marketing campaign. And the reason I say that is, and sometimes this varies with smaller companies, but closed won revenue, great for marketing to track that, but also usually falls somewhat out of your control. If you have a lot of MQLs and a lot of source pipeline and it's not converting, marketing should definitely partner with the sales team to try and figure out why that is. Could be bad leads, could be bad qualification, could also be that the sales team is not following up properly, or I hate to say it, but maybe a younger sales team, for lack of a better way to say that, maybe they're not equipped to sell that product well. So, if there's a mismatch between something like source pipeline and closed won, definitely looking at that. And sometimes it's just a really long sales cycle too. I know there's like a built-in impatience to go from pipeline to revenue, but I've worked in cloud infrastructure for a long time. It's a long sales cycle, and there's not much that's ever going to change that. If you got to move an on-premises data center into a cloud, I mean, there's no amount of marketing material that's going to make that more process. There's no customer case study or white paper that Tom Nikl can publish and gate in a campaign that's going to make that like that much faster of an actual migration process. But
exactly. So yeah, those are some things definitely to consider. And you mentioned sales. So when it comes to other teams outside of marketing, when you're collaborating, that is one of the things that will make or break a campaign. And so how do you ensure there's effective alignment and collaboration across other teams like sales, like product and creative?
Sure. It's critical, honestly, for a campaign to be successful. It's really pretty critical, especially in the planning phases, but even in the execution phases. So in the planning phases, there's a couple of teams that I think really need to come together. One, the product team. Two, the marketing team. Three, the sales team. Why? The product team is building something, and it's not uncommon for the product team to be building something that they're launching. And you've got to keep in mind as a marketer, anything the product team invests thousands of hours in, and even the smallest feature could be thousands of engineering and QA hours. Everything they launch is like their baby, right? Mm-hmm. And everyone wants to throw a baby shower for their baby. And unfortunately, in marketing, like not every baby deserves a baby shower. And that's just like the hard reality. And that's why having sales involved is really crucial. Because what I've seen happen a lot is product and marketing will sync, and product will say, we're launching X and we need a huge launch for this. And marketing will say, well, this is like kind of more of a feature. We're really not sure you need like the full weight of like a massive, alpha launch for this. And marketing will often get overruled. But if you can pull sales into the equation and say, hey, sales, here's what we're launching. What do you think? Is this going to make you money? Is this going to empower your field team to close deals quicker or bigger deals? Like how much money is this going to bring to the table for you? If we spend $1 million on this launch, are you going to close $10 million more of business in Q1 or H1 or whatever? So sales can actually be a really important check, like a reality check on whether or not something is worthwhile to spend your valuable marketing time and energy and dollars on for a launch. If sales comes back to you and says, hey, this is interesting, but my sales team's not going to sell it, doesn't want to sell it, isn't going to make money on it, our customers aren't interested in it, then you've really got to ask yourself, why are we going to spend time like marketing this? And then ask your field team, okay, well, what in the portfolio would move the needle for you? What should we do a campaign on? Maybe we don't need to do a campaign on the new stuff. Should we do an ABM campaign to promote something we've already got that you've seen really accelerates your sales cycle, but people don't know about it? Is there something that makes deals twice as big when customers learn about it it's just been kind of like a sleeper hit? So I know that having multiple teams collaborate, it can slow the process down. And I get that. And that can be tough. But I think the extra collaboration in the early phase, like that extra collaboration will save you so much trouble later on. I mean, I'd rather spend an extra month hashing this out with everyone early on than spend $1 million and 1,000 marketing hours on a campaign that goes nowhere. And
Yes.
then once you get there, then it's all finger pointing. Products asking, why is no one adopting this feature? And sales is asking, why'd you waste your money on this? And then the field's asking, why aren't we closing more business? So that product marketing sales collaboration is really important. And the way I approach that, again, maybe an obvious answer, but just over communication. What I put in practice at Google, where I'm at currently, I have a weekly hour-long meeting with a bunch of my key stakeholders. And every week we meet for an hour. And by the way, I'm actually not a big advocate of meetings, let alone recurring meetings, let alone hour-long recurring meetings. I know that is a big commitment.
Yes.
Every week, I get 15 to 20 people that eagerly join. They pre-populate my agenda because I send it out a couple of days early. I get people from the regions joining at weird hours. Sorry, not weird hours, just,
Yeah.
uncomfortable hours for them. And then we do have some regional friendly sessions for them as well to better accommodate them. But, the proof is in the pudding, and I asked them, because what happened is we ended up having all these like one-off meetings and we had some misfires. And I was like, let's just do like one of these 1 hour every week where we talk about everything. And I think we'll have fewer, sillier one-off meetings. I think this will actually save time in the long run and it'll reduce errors in the long run.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for like, I don't know, 8 months now, and everyone seems really happy with it. So just over communicate. Like it sounds obvious, but even took me a while to kind of figure that out. So I think that's key. Sales, marketing, product alignment, and for marketing, it's not just product marketing. When I say marketing in this case, yeah, product marketing will own some things like, and this varies for companies, by the way. In my case, messaging, audience, asset creation, things like that. But I'm also working with my social media team, my PR and comms team, my campaign team, who does all the magic on the back end. They deal with all of like the Marketo stuff and the lead attribution and, the branding team and all of that stuff. So, the downside to campaigns, there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen, usually, even when I've been at, smaller startups, it's still like a pretty, as a percentage of employee headcount, it's still, it's a pretty big undertaking. But if you want to do it right, over communicate, at least in the beginning, for sure. So, the weekly check-in, believe it or not, saves a lot of toil later on if you do it right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that all resonates. So I think you got some good advice there at the beginning when you said, sometimes marketing can get pushed to the side, their opinion. So if you bring some extra firepower in there, like sales, then that really gets your credibility and the motion going much farther than it probably would on your own. So I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, and like, who doesn't want to have allies?
Yes.
I think it's really important to like build those partnerships and build that trust. And what I found actually is that like if you have that trust with a product team and a sales team, and you can all kind of agree and be like, hey, this is probably not the best thing that we should spend our time on a campaign, but we think we should do X. As long as you're doing a campaign on something and, and you're generating leads and making money, people are happy, right? So as long as you're not going to your product team and saying, yeah, we're not doing a campaign on anything, like that doesn't work for anyone. So, but having that kind of like trifecta and being like, look, this isn't the right thing, but here's what we think is the right thing. Like most people are okay with that. Come with the solution, right? Don't just come with a no, come with a solution
Yeah.
backed by, data. And that's where, because you're right, like sometimes marketing will just get steamrolled if you don't have those allies and that data and that other solution. So yeah, it's definitely helpful. Make friends, not enemies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, allies will get you far. So that's absolutely for sure. Okay, cool. So, obviously that clear communication, sharing information, getting allies, those are, pure gold when it comes to working in a team to get a campaign out. So, once the campaign is out and it's live, what are the ways that you really look at tracking progress and then adapting if it's not going your way? So things like, what metrics or KPIs, we did talk about that earlier in terms of marketing, pipeline influence. If you want to dive deeper into that a little bit and what tools you are using to track the success, would love to hear a little bit more about that and how you adjust if you see something's not working.
Sure. And I guess I should frame from my perspective, the campaigns I'm working on are primarily like, we have a lot of assets that are gated behind landing pages. People fill out forms. We collect information. We have a BDR team that triages them. They go down a funnel, and then like those go through certain phases. And then that eventually hopefully turns into closed $1. So there are some metrics like I'm not necessarily talking about social media campaigns where you talk about like engagement and impressions and things like that. That's another type of campaign you can run. I don't do a lot of those currently. So I'm more talking about the latter that I talked about just for like listener context. So for me, we do track a lot of things. Like I said, we track it from, interactions and leads, which is just like someone visited our webpage and someone filled out our form. And then you go up through the chain to like marketing qualified leads and like qualified, sales qualified leads and stuff like that. And I think that's where, qualified sales opportunities, that's where the rubber starts hitting the road, because there's been some kind of qualification with like a business development rep or someone like that. Someone filled out a form and we got them on the phone and we made sure that they're like serious about wanting to actually talk to us and investigate our products or services. And then obviously opportunity pipeline, once we figured out, roughly, what they're interested in and in what kind of volume. And I think that's the sweet spot, like I said, for marketers, qualified sales opportunities and pipeline, because that's also, it's somewhat impartial, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
MQL, like, okay, they came to our websites, they downloaded our assets. That's still kind of only lived in marketing land. But
Yes.
once a business development rep from like the sales team has talked to someone and qualified them, well, like that's an objective third party, in my
Yes.
opinion, right? Like that's not a marketer assigning some random pipeline value. That's a salesperson, and so that's why I at least have more faith that, oh, good, we have generated like quality leads that are turning into something, and then if those opportunities don't convert into closed $1, then one, I'm more than happy to partner with the sales team to figure out why the conversion rate is low.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's probably not all the lead's fault, but like let's figure it out. Um, but so in terms of measuring success for me, qualified sales opportunities, pipeline, and then follow it through to close one, even though you have less and less control as you go down that bucket. And then, like I said, you lose a little bit of control over that, but like partner with your sales team. And this this hits close to home for me, man. Like I worked at a startup that will remain nameless, and it was a pretty toxic place to work. And one of the things that made it so toxic was the sales VP and the marketing VP, like they just hated each other.
Interesting.
Um, and literally, like every other day, the sales VP would ask for a Salesforce report to validate that the marketing leads were horrible, and then 2 days later, the marketing VP would ask for a Salesforce report to validate that the sales team was just not closing business properly. And round we went, like all week, every week. And it was just constant finger pointing. And it's like y'all are grown adults, professionals at the VP level, and all you're doing is finger pointing. And the CEO at that company didn't help anything here either. But and I'm keeping this anonymous,
Of course. Yes.
but we lower folks on the totem pole. Like we'd all just be like, can we just have a kumbaya moment? Can we just get everyone in a room together? Like, because the marketers and the field people, we're all talking together behind the scenes while the VPs are beefing, and we're trying to like problem solve. Like, hey, like, is it the leads? Is it the BDR process? Is it the handoff? Is it the assets? Is it the strip? Like, we're genuinely trying to solve problems, and then we're being forced to waste time on these like finger pointing report these exercises. Thankfully, both VPs ended up getting let go and replaced with people that were much more like friendly. And that's when things finally started to change and we all started to like work together. And ultimately, I think that we did turn it around and identify kind of like what was going wrong and stuff like that. So my meta point is just like campaigns do go wrong. That
Yeah.
is okay.
Yeah.
That is okay.
Huh.
Just don't waste time like finger pointing. Like that's not gonna solve your issues.
Sure.
Partner, again, allies, make friends, not
Yeah.
enemies. Like
Yes.
it doesn't matter whose fault it was. Like just because the more time you waste finger pointing, it's just time you're wasting money, right? Like leads cost money, and if you're generating bad leads, then you're costing more money than you have to. So just hug it out and try to figure out what's going wrong with it. And so that's an example of how not to solve problems effectively. Now I'll give an example of another example where I think things were solved more effectively. So actually at Google, I was working on our infrastructure campaign like a couple of years ago, and it was early in the year. This was like, I don't know, 2, 3 years ago, and it's like, I don't know, February, March. It's early year, and we were admittedly off to a slow start. Like our QSO numbers pipeline, like it was very low, and we had like our monthly marketing review or something, and one of our like a very high level VP was joining, and they didn't always join, and they just looked at the numbers and they're like, oh, what, like, should we just kill that campaign? And like your heart stops and you're like, oh my god, like my baby, like no, like you can't just kill my baby. And like and from their perspective, it's a fair question, right? Like, without all the additional context of how this thing usually plays out throughout the year and not knowing all the changes we just made and things
Yes.
like that, like it was a fair question. And in some ways I'm glad I heard it. It lit a fire under me and some other folks that were on that call. Immediately after that call, we had like an emergency code red call with some key collaborators, and we're like, we gotta fix this ASAP. Like we have a month to really like put a plan together. And so we came up with like a really cool plan. Like, how are we gonna like really like turbocharge this?
Yeah.
And what we did was we immediately started reaching out to third parties who could do content syndication ASAP. So instead of relying solely on what was kind of like an organic effort at that point, we reached out to companies that could do third party content syndication. We
Yeah.
contracted some companies to do like third parties to do paid webinars that have lead guarantees, like quality MQL guarantees. And then within like 1 or 2 months, we had definitely caught up to like where we were supposed to be tracking, I think, on like QSOs and pipeline. And by the end of the year, I think we finished as either the number one or the number two campaign.
Wow.
Yeah, like we totally turned it around. And so again, but like that's how you problem solve. What we didn't do was send a nasty gram up the chain about how we felt called out by like our VP. We didn't go pout in a corner. We didn't like hide. We didn't try to pretend that things were actually great. Like, no, we like tightened our belt.
Sure.
And we were like, okay, how do we fix this? We put together a plan, and thankfully for us, the plan worked, right? And the plan might not have, and if that plan had not worked, then we might have just been like, hey, like maybe a campaign on infrastructure writ large is not actually what we should be doing, and then we could have pivoted to some other campaign. Good news for marketing: there's usually no shortage of stuff you can market and run campaigns on, and sometimes you should cut your losses. Like sunk cost fallacy. Yeah, like if it's just not working, time in, time out, market something else, try something else.
Yeah.
So this one worked out well, and I think that's an example of like how you triage a problem, take feedback, execute, and then succeed. And like it's a success story now, and I'm so thankful that our VP was just blunt about it. Was like, should we just nuke this thing? And it was like, oh, okay, we gotta really fix this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like my Rocky story, one of my fondest like come from behind success stories.
That's great. And I like that. It was kind of a compare and contrast story. One where there's a bunch of finger pointing and that it didn't really accomplish anything. And then the second one where you took some feedback from someone that maybe quite didn't have all the context, but you were able to kind of use that as a catapult to make some adjustments to improve the performance. So I think that's great. That's a great turnaround story.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my faves.
Awesome. Well, so when we think about obviously moving on from some of those particular those stories where you kind of measured performance, the measurement was evaluated, you had to adjust in midstream. Let's talk about some just general lessons learned that you gathered from some of the campaigns that you've worked on. So could you share any experience that taught you a valuable lesson about campaign execution?
A valuable lesson on campaign execution. Yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe I got a little ahead of myself on some of these with, like making sure you collaborate, and that last one on, kind of like really, having to go into overdrive. Let's see, a lesson learned midstream. Remaining calm in the face of adversity, I think, is a good one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of similar to like what I just talked about. Like when you face challenges, like don't panic. There's a lot of tools in the marketing toolbox, and quite often a campaign will start with A, B, and C. And if A, B, and C are not quite working, try out D, E, and F. So like if you've got a lot of gated landing pages and blogs, but you haven't done anything on social media, like, well, okay, well, like try that. Like, why haven't you done anything social? Do you have any videos integrated into your campaigns or anything on YouTube? Maybe any shorts or reels? Like, there's usually a lot of other things that you can try. But again, I didn't talk about it a lot, but don't be afraid to just like stop. This idea that you have to keep a campaign going in perpetuity, if it's just not fostering results, I think that's silly. And honestly, I think that can lend a PMM tremendous credibility. Like, don't go rogue, but if you think the campaign is really not working, here's what I would do. First, come up with a new idea. Like, you cannot not have like a next idea.
Sure.
Once you have like, your next idea, pull in your stakeholders, your fellow, like a couple of your closest campaign stakeholders, and maybe one person from the field and one person from product, and be like, hey, I don't feel like any of us are seeing the results that we expected or wanted over the course of X period of time. And based on my marketing experience, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to turn this one around. I think we should just pivot. And here's what I think we should pivot to. And then lay out your new plan, and then get by it and either turn the old one off or adjust it in kind of like some major ways to do what you need to do. It kind of depends. Is it a full turn off, turn something new on, or like kind of a 180-degree pivot where you swap in new assets for the old ones and, stuff like that. But I don't know, like, don't be afraid to change course. I mean, I've done this a number of times where clearly we overestimated the appeal to an audience, or we got the audience straight up wrong. It's like no one really knows what's going to happen when you go into these things. Campaigns are like life. Hindsight's 2020.
Yes.
Yeah. Totally. And don't feel bad about it. I mean, like anyone who, I don't know, if you get anyone on this podcast who says they've never made mistakes or everything they've ever done has ever been infallible, note to listeners, don't listen to that person. I mean, like, either they're lying or they're like perfect, but I guess they're better PMMs than I. But like, yeah, like you make mistakes and you pivot, and like that's life. Like even even the best ball players strike out, right? Like that's why their batting average, like the best baseball Hall of Famer, what's their batting average? Like 400, best case. That means they struck out 600% of, or like six, like they went 4 for 10.
Yeah.
Even so yeah, don't feel bad about it. Like it's okay. Just be willing to learn the lessons in real time and pivot, and sometimes pivot hard.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And that's super helpful. Like, basically to summarize, say keep calm. That's like the number one thing. Don't freak out. That really kind of helps you be centered and grounded. And then second, be willing to cut bait. Say, if this really truly isn't working, then it doesn't need to be this zombie campaign that just goes on and on and on. You need to just let it sunset it, and then try something different. And that's okay. And again, it's okay if the other one was a mistake, maybe you did everything you could. You did all the research, you collaborated with all the right people, you thought you had the right audience, but sometimes the campaign just doesn't work. And so then you have to pivot. And so it wasn't necessarily anybody's fault. It's just, it didn't work. So then you got to change direction. So I think those are great tips for sure.
Yeah. And the only thing I would caveat that with is the other side of that coin is you do have to give campaigns time to like mature. And like sometimes you will get pressure from, especially the field, like, where's my pipeline? It's been a month. And it's like, okay, like chill out. Like it's been a month. Like, so you do have to give things at least a quarter and probably at least 6 months to really have any idea of how things are going to go. So like, I'm not saying if you don't have $1 million in pipe after 2 months to get rid of it. I mean, like, I'm saying, you've given it a year and it's clear that you're just not getting the results, then have a serious reflection on whether or not it's time to hard pivot. But so give it its due, and then have a hard reflection about it. And like, you'll know. I mean, I feel like in our gut, you just usually kind of know. Like, are you excited about the results you're seeing after 6 months to 12 months? Or are you like, nah? Like, would you put it on your LinkedIn? You know,
Yeah.
if you're on your LinkedIn, then you're not excited about the results you've seen. And if you're not excited about the results you've seen, then do something different.
Absolutely. No, I think those are good. That is a good caveat because you can't just turn on a dime. These things take time, so you need to have a sufficient amount of data and duration to say it is or it's not working. So that's great. Awesome. All right. Well, we have now reached the rapid fire question section. So
Yummy.
get ready for a few quick questions that I've asked the other guests, and it'll be interesting to kind of see how you respond to them. So, first rapid fire question: what's your favorite marketing tool?
I'm obviously biased, but I do mean this objectively. Right now, Google AI Studio,
Yeah,
which is like Gemini.
yeah,
I mean, like, I'm sorry, like, it's awesome. Quick questions, long questions, drafting first drafts of content, image generation for someone like me who has zero artistic capability. Like, I cannot draw,
yeah,
paint,
yeah,
sing. Like,
uh-huh.
acting is about the only thing I can do artistically speaking.
Yeah.
So, image generation, market research. I mean, like, just like I'm A plus. I love it. I use it every day.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure that's definitely a handy tool to have. So, yeah, I mean, yes, you probably are a little biased, but of course, it's great to know what tools are out there. So, what do you think? Second question, rapid fire question: what's the most underrated skill in product marketing?
Uh, a segueing from my last answer right now, like how do you use AI successfully in your job? If you're just hiding under your desk trying to ignore that whole AI thing, you're doing it wrong. Ignore it at your peril. You know, like I don't know if AI is going to take my job in like a year or 5 years or 10 years. I don't know. All I know is that right now, if you're a marketer and you're not using AI to be the best marketer that you can be, then you are going to be leapfrogged by the marketers who are.
Absolutely.
So you know, is it you're dinged if you do and you're dinged if you don't? I don't know. I don't know. But right now, in the moment, like you got to be using all these tools, and like I find them extremely helpful. Again, especially if you're no artistic capability like me, image generation alone, I mean, it's fantastical.
No, that's great. Fantastical. Yeah. That's definitely a good tip is you kind of use those tools that are available that helps you advance for sure. And there are people who still have yet to embrace that and that will definitely leave them behind. So definitely a good tip there. Next question is what's the biggest mistake to avoid in product marketing?
The biggest mistake I often see is product marketers just they forget about who's your audience.
Yeah.
Like no matter what you're embarking on, like that's the first question you should ask. Like, who is this for? Especially if you are presenting. I'll never forget my first year at Google. I had to make presentations for their sales kickoff. So I was like, okay, this is for the field. Like, what is this presentation about? It's about how can I teach the field how to make money with the products that I market. Like, period. That's what the field wants to know. How do I make money?
Sure.
And so we had these rounds of previews for like our executives in product marketing to like review your presentations. And I was very flattered that like leadership loved my presentation and I get like super into it. I love being on stage. And then I got to watch everyone else's and they all got torn to shreds because they all showed up with their marketing product pitch decks. That was it. And
Interesting.
all the feedback was the same. Like you are not pitching your product to the field. That is not what sales kickoff is about. Like, why does the field want to sell this? Like, who is their audience? What are the benefits for them? Right? Like, why should the field pay attention to your product? And like, don't get me wrong, you got to explain the product and the benefit to the customer and stuff like that. But what's in it for your audience, which in this case is actually the field, and
Right.
they are for better or worse coin operated. How do you make that money, honey? So you know, like, I was glad. Like that's so. Before I made my deck, like I think my third slide after like, hey, I'm Tom Nikl was like literally a stack of dollar bills, and I was like, here's how you can retire your entire quota with
Yes.
by migrating virtual machines. Like at the time, that's what I was talking about. And
Mhm.
it's like, if that doesn't pique a salesperson interest, like, I don't know what will. And so the first part of my deck was just like, I'm going to retire your quote. I'm going to do it quickly. And it's like, okay. So, audience, always remember your audience. Like, who are you talking to? What's in it for them? What is going to pique their interest in like the first 2 minutes?
Yeah. I like that. And that's a good, yeah, that's interesting because yes, you're right. Typically you think about the customer when it comes to how you're crafting your materials, but when you need to think about the exact situation and you're in, and if that's you're not talking at a sales kickoff to customers directly, you're talking to
Exactly.
who's going to present it. So I love that. That's really it's like be very targeted on. Maybe there's another situation where you're talking to partners specifically. You need to think about it's not, yes, you need to cover what the end benefits are for the end customer, but you also need to what's going to be the benefit to them to be even have incentive to pitch this at all. So yeah,
Exactly.
I think that's a
And
great.
and for campaigns, like, who's your main buyer? Like, what's your buyer persona? And be
Yeah,
specific.
absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. All right. Next question is what's your biggest mistake to avoid? Oh, I'm sorry. We talked about that one. The next question was what's one thing you wish you knew when you started in product marketing?
I'm gonna give you a twofer. One, marketing is not a math problem, and what I mean by that is a math problem is like typically it's binary, it's true or false. There's one answer. It's objective. Marketing is subjective. We're working with word problems. Some people will love your solution, your content, your messaging, and some people will hate it. And so take all feedback with a grain of salt. So, for example, if I write a tagline that I love and Josh, you hate, and then I change my tagline so that you love it and I now hate it, what have we gained? Nothing.
Right.
One person in my audience loves it and one person in my audience hates it, which means I could have just gone with my headline and saved like a couple minutes of time and we're in the same place. So my point is like the bar should really not be like perfection. I don't feel like that necessarily exists in marketing. Like, if a lot of people love what you're doing, like, ignore the couple people who have dissenting opinions because that's life. In marketing, that's life. You could
Yes.
probably find a handful of people who think Apple's Think Different campaign was stupid. And that was one of the most amazing marketing campaigns the earth has ever seen, right? But there are still people that hated it. Got Milk, amazing marketing campaign. People probably hated it. So, marketing, it's a word problem. Like, don't get hung up on the fact that some people will never see eye to eye with it, right? Like, that's life. And then number two, which is kind of similar, pick your battles. Don't make mountains out of molehills. The sooner, I wish I'd learned this a little sooner in my career, actually, the phrase disagree and commit.
Yeah.
My philosophy at work now is kind of like, if I have like a slight objection, maybe I bring it up, maybe I don't. Like, is it worth it? Probably not. If I have a passionate objection, I'll bring it up once. I will voice my opinion because I think people probably want to hear it. And I'll make an impassioned case and I'll offer up an alternative solution for it. But if the general consensus is still pass, disagree and commit. Okay,
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
Like, that's okay. All I can do is give you my opinion. If you don't like it, that's fine. I will give you my absolute all. I'll give you my absolute best moving forward. But I'm not going to like escalate, escalate, escalate. I mean, like, I'd have to be ridiculously passionate about something crazy to like keep like kicking that horse, right? For lack of I probably could have thought of a better analogy. I apologize, people. Don't kick horses, people. I meant that only figuratively.
Oh,
So yeah,
we know.
like, don't be the nitpicker. Don't always like criticize everything. And even if it's a serious objection, like, raise it once. And if people want to move on, then do it. I mean, like, don't be that person, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think no, those are great. Those are both great tips in terms of one, your tagline, your content, or whatever. It is absolutely subjective. There's no one right way to do it, and the reality is there are very few absolutes, just in life in general, but especially when you're writing content for something. And then I like your thought about just because one person doesn't like it and then you have to change yours, then you don't like it. That's it's kind of negligible. And so you should I think that's totally important to kind of understand. Even if somebody hates it, like, so what? Like, and if enough people want something different, then that might be a different story. But understanding that there is not this single way to do marketing is really important in terms of your own kind of confidence and self-esteem, but also realizing a lot of this honestly is a matter of opinion.
Yep,
And
exactly.
it's and some people may even try to force something down your neck thinking like, no, this is the one absolute right way, but you got to just remain calm and understand, no, there really isn't one right way. It's a matter of opinion.
Yeah. And I mean,
So
hey, if your CMO is insisting, like, okay, then it's like disagree and commit.
yes,
But if it's just a peer, then it's like, well, I kind of like my way better. I love you, but I like my tagline better. And then, and then A/B test it and see what happens.
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and if you can get data to provide reasons why one way might be better than the other, then absolutely more power to you. But if neither one of you have to have the data, then you need to kind of recognize, yes, there's not this one absolute truth. And then I like what you're saying too. Yes, that kind of depends on the level of person you're talking to.
Yeah, like
Um,
use your best judgment, obviously.
yes, you need you do need to have an opinion. You need to save your ammo for that. There are times where, yes, I think that's a good metric. Like if you're mildly disagree, probably not worth voicing it. If it's something you feel strongly about, then yeah, bring it up. Bring it up once. And if they want to continue to move on, then they continue to move on, and then you disagree and commit. I think that's a good metric. That's a good kind of bellwether to kind of see what is the issue, how much do you disagree with it, and who are you disagreeing with, and then move forward from there. So those are great tips. All right. Last question. What's your favorite podcast?
So I have a couple. I'm a big like Disney theme park nerd, so I listen to like a million podcasts on Disney theme parks. But I also really like two. One's called After Dark: Myths, Misdeeds, and the Paranormal, and it's kind of about like ancient history, like medieval England type
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like the ghosts of Henry VIII type stuff. And then
Interesting.
another is called The Ancients, which is about like Roman and Egyptian and like Mongol, like ancient history. Just they talk about like old famous like kings, like Roman emperors and Egyptian pharaohs and things like that. And I don't know, for some reason I just find it really interesting to learn more about ancient history, for lack of a better term, when I'm not, nerding out on Disney theme park stuff. So.
So that's great. That's awesome. People need to nerd out on multiple topics. So that's good. You got some variety. Well, cool, Tom. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and experience with us today. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to Porter's Product Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, again, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, share it with your network. We'll be back soon with more expert tips and strategies to help you in your product marketing game. And until next time, keep innovating and keep driving impact.
Thanks, Josh. It was a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.